The maitre d' at Elrose didn't even try to hide the hesitation in his voice. "I'm sorry, miss. There's no reservation under that name." I smiled politely, even as my cheeks burned. "Sienna Morales, +1. I was invited by Grant Energy Group." He looked again, his gloved finger scrolling the list on his tablet. The Elrose rooftop shimmered behind him, aglow with golden fairy lights and a panoramic view of the Phoenix skyline. Waitstaff moved like shadows between glass walls and wine glasses. Everyone here looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. I'd picked my most understated dress. Still, I stood out. "I'm afraid your name's not on the guest list," he said again. "Perhaps you received the invitation in error." I didn't flinch. I just looked over his shoulder right on cue. From across the terrace, Oliver Grant, CEO of Grant Energy, and my former boss, laughed a short, smug sound that sliced through the music. He stood flanked by a group of investors. Wine in hand, all tailored suits and self-satisfaction. Well, Morales actually showed up. I turned toward him slowly. His voice was louder than necessary. "Didn't think you'd make it all the way up here without a keycard." Some of the nearby guests chuckled. I didn't. Oliver walked closer, eyes gleaming with that same amused cruelty I'd seen too many times before in boardrooms and budget meetings. "Awkward, huh?" he said, nodding at the maitre d'. "Yeah, Sienna's no longer with the company. Transitioned out a few months ago. Probably didn't get the memo. There's a McDonald's down the block if she's hungry." The maitre d' flinched suddenly, unsure who to obey. I just kept smiling, calm, precise. Then I leaned in, slightly lowering my voice, just enough that only he and the maitre d' could hear me. "You must be new," I said to the maitre d'. "Tell Chef Mara that her business partner is here, and we're running 5 minutes behind schedule." His eyes widened. He glanced toward the back of the restaurant, then back to me. Oliver's smirk faltered. "Nice bluff," he muttered, but I didn't reply. I stepped back from the host stand and let my eyes wander across the rooftop. The space was beautiful glass walls, lined with fire features, soft music from a jazz quartet floating between the tables. I remembered installing the first panels for this rooftop 3 years ago, when it was just steel and scaffolding. 30 seconds later, the back doors burst open. Sienna Chef Mara herself, apron dusted in flour, swept across the floor. "I thought you weren't coming till 8, she hugged me tightly, ignoring the stunned silence that rippled across the patio. "Your suite is ready. I had them bring the 2012 Chateau Margaux up. And yes, we kept the garden booth open." I nodded, still smiling. Oliver was frozen mid-sip. I looked over my shoulder and met his eyes. "Oh," I said, light and casual. "I forgot to thank you, Oliver. If you hadn't left me off the guest list, I wouldn't have gotten such a perfect table. I was 10 when I learned how to lie with a smile. Your mom's picking you up?" the school secretary asked, peering out the window. I nodded, clutching my backpack tight enough to leave marks. She wasn't coming. She hadn't in over a year. By that time, I was living with Abuela Rosa, my grandmother, in a rust-colored apartment above an abandoned warehouse just outside Glendale, the kind of place where the hallway lights flickered like horror movie cliches, and the AC worked only in winter. Every morning, I'd walk past the warehouse loading dock, careful to avoid the broken glass and grease stains, then wait for the city bus that took me 3 zones west to a school full of kids who wore name-brand shoes and carried lunches that didn't come from gas stations. But I wasn't jealous. I was focused. When the other kids complained about homework, I listened. When they laughed at my Goodwill cardigans or the smell of bleach on my clothes, I stayed quiet. I learned early that anger didn't feed you and pride didn't pay rent. After school, I helped Abuela fold laundry for neighbors, then scrubbed trays in the back of Luna's Deli, a corner joint where the tips were bad and the dishwasher leaked like it was held together by curses. I never told anyone I worked. If they asked, I said I was helping family, which wasn't a lie, really. Survival was a kind of inheritance. My first defining moment came at 15. A man in a navy suit, expensive crisp with a phone that probably cost more than our rent, walked into the deli. He ordered café con leche and a guava empanada, then sat in the corner scrolling through emails. I didn't pay attention until he knocked his coffee over by accident. Before the liquid could reach the edge of the table, I grabbed the napkin dispenser, a mop, and a bucket from the back, had it cleaned in 30 seconds flat. "Sharp reflexes," he said, half amused. I didn't say anything, just nodded, but he watched me the rest of the time he was there. The next day he came back, and the day after that. On the third visit, he handed me a business card, Carlos Velez. Velez Urban Development Group. I like fast learners, he said. You ever thought about working somewhere besides here? At the time, I thought he meant another restaurant. I didn't know that one act of instinct, one flash of competence, would become the first domino. 6 months later, I was shadowing his project coordinator on weekends. 2 years after that, I got a scholarship to study environmental design at a public university, thanks to a letter Carlos wrote himself. I'd go back to Luna's sometimes, order the same empanada, sit in the same seat. But I wasn't the girl mopping floors anymore. I was already building something. The house smelled like wet wood and regret. The floorboards creaked. The wallpaper curled at the edges like burnt parchment. It had been sitting empty for 6 years, a forgotten box in a forgotten neighborhood. This is the one, I asked. Carlos nodded. If you want it, bank owned. They'll let it go for under 60. We stood in the living room of a 1950s ranch style just south of downtown Phoenix. The bones were good, the foundation was stable. Everything else needed prayer and demolition. I'm not licensed, I reminded him. You've got vision, he said. And I'll co-sign. You do the legwork. You find the contractors. You run the numbers. Think of it as your first solo. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I made spreadsheets, called every plumber within 10 miles, learned how to read an inspection report, bartered with tile guys, begged favors from painters. I watched YouTube videos on flooring at 2 a.m., took power naps on the bare plywood subfloor. The 4th week, I fired my first contractor for padding hours and ghosting on permits. I didn't cry, I just replaced him, faster than he expected. By month 2, the house looked different. New windows, new paint. The yard once choked with weeds now had a gravel bed and drought-tolerant plants. Nothing fancy, just clean, thoughtful. We listed it at $127,000. It sold in 6 days for $132,000 cash buyer, no contingencies. After taxes and loan repayment, I walked away with $18,240. It was more than my family had ever seen in one place. I went home that night and stared at the check like it might evaporate. Abuela cried when I showed her. I didn't. I just made a copy, laminated it, and taped it inside the door of the old fridge. Then I opened a separate bank account, not under Carlos's name, not connected to anyone, just mine. 2 weeks later, I quit my part-time job at Luna's. Carlos offered me a full-time position with Velez Group, but I declined. I need to build something that's mine, I said. He didn't argue. Instead, he slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a deed to a 2-bedroom bungalow on the east side already signed over to me. A head start, he said. Pay it back however you like. I didn't flip that one. I lived in it. Ate ramen on the floor the first night and wrote out a list on the wall with chalk. Build the next one. Make it smarter. Help someone else do the same. That list stayed up until the drywall was redone 4 years later. By 28, I had a portfolio of 6 properties. Rental income covered my living expenses. I had no debt, no boss, no schedule, but the one I wrote myself. And yet, I kept my LinkedIn quiet, kept my name off headlines. The city wasn't ready for a girl named Sienna Morales to be the face of anything big. Not yet. Let them underestimate me. I was just getting started. The first time I met Oliver Grant, he looked past me like I was part of the furniture. We were in a downtown boardroom, glass walls, filtered air, artisanal, coffee on tap. Grant Energy had just announced a public-private initiative, SunGrid Phoenix, a citywide solar project meant to overhaul municipal buildings, community centers, and low-income housing complexes with renewable energy. The city was offering incentives. Investors were circling, and someone in the mayor's office, probably Carlos, had dropped my name into the mix. That's how I found myself in that room. A local developer with boots-on-the-ground experience, invited to contribute a community-based perspective, as the email had put it. Translation: I wasn't part of the power circle. I was the diversity token. Oliver was every inch the archetype, clean-shaven, East Coast accent, expensive watch barely hidden under his tailored cuff. MBA from Wharton, Dad ran a hedge fund. Probably believed grit was something you got on your loafers. Sienna, was it? He asked, flipping through his meeting packet without looking up. Nice of you to join us. I've been here since 900, I replied. He blinked, then smiled faintly. Of course. He continued the meeting like I wasn't there, zoning concerns. He addressed them to his in-house legal. Community engagement. He nodded at his PR director. Financing, a private equity guy from Manhattan chimed in. Every time I spoke, he cut in, half a second later. Polite on the surface, but surgical in dismissal. I kept notes, smiled, didn't push, yet. A week later, we toured the proposed flagship site, a gutted elementary school on the south side, slated to become the first solar integrated education hub in the project. I showed up early, brought blueprints, talked with the neighborhood association. Oliver showed up 30 minutes late in loafers that had never touched dirt, made one comment about urban blight, and posed for a photo with a kid he'd never see again. This is good PR, he whispered to his photographer, not realizing I was within earshot. That night, I called Carlos. You think he's serious about the community? I asked. He sighed. He's serious about the project. Same thing. There was a long pause. Depends on who's writing the press release. I tried to stay in, tried to contribute. When the plans hit a snag with solar grid capacity in older neighborhoods, I submitted a proposal full of realistic fixes, local vendors, and cost projections 30% lower than Grant Energy's bloated estimates. No one acknowledged it. Then 2 days later, Oliver presented a revised approach that mirrored my document almost line for line, except he slapped his own name on the executive summary and called it an internal pivot. I stared at the screen in silence while he talked through my work like he'd invented it. Carlos, sitting next to me, gave a sympathetic shrug. After the meeting, Oliver patted my shoulder. Great synergy today, he said. Keep bringing that grassroots energy. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't, not yet. Instead, I walked to the lobby bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and pulled out my notebook. I wrote 2 words on the inside cover, he's first. I didn't blow up, didn't slam doors, didn't call him out for stealing my work in front of the board. That wasn't how people like Oliver fell. They didn't collapse from a single hit. They eroded from pressure they never saw coming. So I made myself invisible again. I skipped happy hours, let him take credit in meetings. Nodded politely when he said, "We'll let Sienna handle the community optics." Like I was a piece of furniture that smiled. While he talked, I built. I started with Marisol Kim, a third-generation solar engineer and minority stakeholder in the SunGrid venture. She was sharp-tired of being sidelined and hated how Oliver spoke over her in every strategy call. He's got the EQ of a bagel, she said once, but the board eats it up. Over lunch at a Vietnamese cafe, I floated the idea of consolidating votes on major decisions. No public shifts, I said. Just alignment. She leaned back, arms crossed. What's the angle direction? I replied. Not sabotage, just correction. She didn't say yes that day, but the next week she looped me into an email chain with 2 other investors. By week 3, I had soft commitments representing 22% of voting power. Quiet, unofficial, but real. Next, I reached out to Daniel Vega, a construction logistics guy, whose firm was bleeding money from Oliver's constantly shifting timelines. He changes the scope every Tuesday. Daniel growled over whiskey. And the invoices don't match what we agreed on. Buy him out, I suggested. Or let me. He laughed. Then I slid over a folder, clean offer, premium margin, full NDA. You'd recoup in 6 months, I said. And be free of his mess. Daniel called me 2 days later. Deal. The more I listened, the more I realized no one actually liked working with Oliver. They tolerated him. For access, for funding, for fear. But respect, trust, loyalty, none. That was the crack I slipped through. By the end of the quarter, I'd quietly negotiated buyouts or proxy support from 4 key partners, giving me just over 51% control of all strategic decisions in the SunGrid project. No one announced it. There were no headlines, no board votes, just fine print, quiet signatures, filed paperwork, and a waiting game. The perfect moment came in the form of an email subject SunGrid Celebration Gala at Elrose Rooftop, sent by Oliver's assistant. Billed as a victory party. I wasn't on the list. No RSVP, no +1. Just silence. My name had been deliberately left off. Again. This time I didn't email to correct it. Didn't call to ask why. I picked up the phone and called Mara, the head chef at Elrose and one of my oldest friends. Is your Saturday night free? I asked. For you always. Good. I think it's time Oliver learned who signs the wine order. She laughed. Oh, you're coming to the gala? No, I said, smiling. I'm hosting it. The maitre d' didn't recognize me at first. New hire, young, nervous in that freshly pressed kind of way. I'm sorry, miss. There's no reservation under that name. I smiled gently, not surprised. Sienna Morales, I said. +1. I'm with the Grant Energy Group. He tapped at the screen, frowned. I waited. Then from across the terrace I heard it, the voice I'd come expecting. Morales Oliver Grant. His laugh was louder than it needed to be. It always was. Well, look who dressed up, he called out, eyes scanning me like I was an outdated app. Hope you're not here for a free meal. A few heads turned, just enough for him to feel powerful. He strolled over, cocktail in hand, that same smug tilt to his mouth. His tie was loosened just enough to signal dominance without trying too hard. I'm afraid this is an invite-only event, he said to the maitre d', who looked unsure. Sienna's no longer with the project. Maybe she got her dates mixed up. He turned back to me. There's a rooftop bar down the street. Bit more your speed. It was also perfectly on brand. I didn't react. Didn't blink. I just tilted my head slightly and spoke softly to the maitre d'. Could you let Chef Mara know her business partner has arrived, and please tell her we'll take the garden alcove. The young man's eyes darted to Oliver, then to me, then he disappeared through the kitchen doors. Oliver chuckled. Bold move. But bluffing doesn't. The kitchen doors burst open. Sienna Chef Mara, radiant in her whites, strode out like a storm in full control. You're early, she kissed both my cheeks, ignoring Oliver entirely. Come, she said, taking my arm. We've prepared your table. And the 2012 Margot as requested. I turned to Oliver just as he began to realize what was happening. I thought I'd enjoy a quiet dinner, I said. But it seems the entertainment started early. The garden alcove sat half a level above the main rooftop, semi-private, overlooking the lights of downtown Phoenix. Elrose's crown jewel and the only table with a personal sommelier. I sat down as servers brought out the first course. From across the terrace, Oliver stood motionless, still processing. That's when I saw Marisol Daniel and the other investors arrive. One by one, they were guided not to Oliver's long, glittering communal table, but up to mine. I stood to greet each of them. Handshakes, small smiles, no drama. By the time dessert came, Oliver was at a table alone. His name wasn't on the new project charter. His access had already been revoked, and he didn't even know it yet. The next morning, my phone buzzed at 7:42 a.m., Oliver Grant calling for the first time in 3 months. I let it ring. A second later, a text appeared. What the hell is going on? My access is blocked. Legal's not answering. Call me. I didn't respond. At 8:10, a knock came at my office door. Lisa poked her head in. He's here. Let him wait. I gave it 10 minutes before walking out. Oliver stood in the hallway, red-eyed and rumpled, gripping his phone like a lifeline. The contrast was jarring. Gone was the polished, cocky CEO. What remained was a man unraveling. You've hijacked the system, he snapped the moment he saw me. You shut me out. No, I said calmly. You removed yourself the day you removed my name from the guest list. He blinked. What does that even mean? I handed him a folder. Inside, signed buyouts from Marisol Daniel and the remaining stakeholders. Updated articles of ownership. Legal filings registered with the city and the formal termination of his advisory role. This isn't legal, he hissed. It's airtight, I replied. The votes were clean, the offers generous. You burned every bridge, one passive-aggressive email at a time. He flipped through the pages, face paling. You can't run this project without me. I shrugged. Funny, that's what you said about me. By noon, the press had it. Local founder secures full ownership of SunGrid Phoenix. The interviews came fast, radio podcasts, even a spot on the morning news. I kept my answers polished, short, professional. But people noticed. They saw who was still standing. They saw whose name was on the new contracts, the new permits. The plaque outside the first solar education hub that opened that summer. The Morales Center for Innovation, founded by Sienna Morales. Oliver's name wasn't anywhere. Weeks later, I stood on the rooftop of Elrose alone this time. The garden alcove was empty except for a single chilled glass of wine, and the city below glowing like something it had always meant to become. Jake joined me a few minutes later, setting down his phone. You did it. I nodded. Not just for me, for who. Then I looked out at the skyline. Thought of Abuela folding laundry in the heat, of Luna's deli, of the laminated check on the fridge, for every girl who was told she didn't belong in the room. The maitre d' stepped onto the rooftop, slightly breathless. Ms. Morales, he said, holding out a small velvet box. From Chef Mara. Inside was a custom key engraved with the Elrose logo. I smiled. She says she's renaming the garden alcove, he added. What's it called? The owner's table. In that moment, I remembered the first time Oliver had laughed at me. The first time someone said I wasn't on the list. The first time I stared at a door that wouldn't open. And now I didn't need their table. I owned the building.